Hello and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Ben.
And I'm Chris.
And I'm Swears.
And thank you for joining us. This is the Ruck Line special where we go through the conundrum that is the Ruck Line this year. Normally it was set and forget, the Gaundy show, the Max Gawn and what was it? Grundy. Jeez, I forgot
Grundy.
He's at Izzy at the moment, Chris. But before we get into it though, our sponsors as well. So sponsored to you by splashvodka.com.au. It's gone for a bit of a runner here. And trying to get on our Manscaped as well. So waiting to hear from a response if they want to continue their great sponsorship into this next season. SC Insider 100, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok as well. And all the audio platforms as well, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, you name it. Been popping off. I think we had 2,000 views in about 2 days or streams in 2 days. So really kicking off next season, guys. YouTube as well, Chris, where can they find us?
Just search for Supercoach Insider. And we're also, I've been impressed with your efforts on YouTube Shorts, which seem to be a real quick upload. They're just, obviously basically just essentially TikTok for YouTube. is what
it is. And we're putting on TikTok as well. TikTok getting the more views at this point. But YouTube Shorts, because from the 1st of February, YouTube Shorts will start to have the revenue and stuff as well. And we're already on there for revenue for YouTube. So I thought we'll make some shorts as well. I like how you say quick edits, Chris. It's not that short. Even putting all the... I don't know if you've seen the forward line and the defensive line where I had all these images and stuff. It probably took me longer to edit. Doing all the audio, doing the video probably took me longer than the actual episode I did with Swizz. So it was like 30 minutes to record, and I was spending about maybe 30 minutes to an hour to actually edit. So,
thanks, man.
Oh, great work, mate.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
Sure they do. Nice
sure they do.
Right. So, where do we start, lads? Where's the? Have you got any plans for this one, or we just sort of keep recording and just go hell for leather? Is that the plan?
Isn't that what we normally do anyway?
It has to be hell for leather. But let's just start with the Gawn and Grundy situation, considering that in years gone by, it was the Grundy and the Gaundy show. So where do you think that influences and how it impacts? So let's go with Grundy coming in, Gawn already there. Chris, what do you think happens to both of them?
So Gawn's spoken about it, and so has Grundy. Look, they've all spoken about it, I suppose. So we've got a few snippets to work with, but Gawn has basically said he will play any role that's going to help the team the most. So that means that, unfortunately, he's the most susceptible to having a decrease in his ruck time. Then it's come out a little bit that the likely scenario is that Gawn basically takes the defensive half stoppages and Grundy takes the forward half stoppages. So if split a line down the middle, they might split the CBAs. Gawn goes behind the ball, so we know that that's good for his scoring because he can obviously intercept the ball, and Grundy goes forward. Is he a better goal kicker? Get a better mark? I'm not sure. I think it's much of a muchness. I've never seen Grundy as a real good forward option, but he's pops up and takes a mark and kicks a goal. He'd be good at very least. He's always very good at getting the ball to ground. And I think that's probably where Melbourne see his role as not necessarily the forward in the goal square, but the forward, getting up the ground and impacting the game that way. So, unfortunately for me, what we also saw last year with Grundy was when paired with Cameron, his scoring was nowhere near what it has been in the past few years. So, what he averaged could be potentially what he's going to average, which is around 105, is it, that he averaged last year?
103 and change, I think.
103, yeah. With a low game there of 54. I don't think you can select either of them without looking at it. I personally, I just don't see any purpose in doing that. They're both going to be impacted in some description. We don't know how. All we really know is that they're not going to be the 120 force that they have been over the past 3 years. Now, they could, because there was also no other clear option, they could potentially still be really good options, which is just crazy when you think about it. And Brody at his price might be just cheap enough to just go, well, I don't like any of the options, so I'm just going to go Brody Grundy and cross my fingers and see what happens. You can't do that with Max Gawn, though. He's too expensive. 622K on a flyer is just not really what I call a good way to spend your money in Supercoach. But yeah, that's how I see the pairing. What about you, Swizz?
Yeah, so I think against the better teams, I can see Gawn starting in the back line, and their winger is actually their half backer. and he starts on the corner. And once the bounce goes, they race up and then they move the half forward up, and it becomes sort of a 5, 6, 7 situation with Gawn as the intercept marker. Against the weaker teams, I think Gawn probably starts forward because they know they're going to win the bounce and get the ball forward, and he'll take marks there. With Grundy as your starting midfielder, your starting ruck. But how much then game time does Grundy play? Obviously, he had some injury concerns last year too. So early in the season, he could spend 70%, 75% on the field, and they could rotate. Especially now, we've talked about the interchange bench sub rule. Do they potentially in games where they're up by 10 goals at 3/4 time, they go, okay, Grundy or Gawn, one of you this week, you're going off at 3/4 time. We don't need you there. So I think we're going to have different situations. We know Melbourne are going to be up the top, so they're going to have games where they're going to absolutely monster teams, and they're going to have the luxury to do whatever they want. It wouldn't surprise me in cutthroat situations, both of them start in the midfield and I can't wait to see that time they actually do it. And one takes the ruck, and then maybe there's a repeat stoppage, and the other one flicks over and takes the ruck and just confuses the whole setup that they've got going there. So I don't want to touch either of them because we just don't have definitive roles. And I don't think Grundy's coming out and going 120, over the first 5-6 weeks and going to price you out. So it's maybe something we look at by time or even if it's in that upgrade season, if we really need to jump on Grundy, but it's not going to be gone.
Well,
I think two things are important.
We saw that two ruck system that you just described with Geelong last year, right? So usually there's a follow the leader style in the football, and that was with obviously Blitzarves and Stanley that were moving back to centre half back. And that's I think their whole purpose of what they're trying to do. The added bonus of the sub means that they can take that risk and flyer and then go, okay, well if they need more run, bang, one of them can go out. Or maybe they get out a forward like no, Wiedemann's not there anymore, is he? So who are their forwards right now? They've got
Benny Brown, Fritsch, Tommy McDonald.
Yeah, right. So I mean, they might just go, well, Ben Brown get out of here instead of, and we'll play forward. Grundy out of the forward line.
But
so
I think because of especially Gawn's age now, that like games against sort of your Norths and Hawthorns and stuff like that, 3/4 time they'll be like, off you get Skip, and you'll be like, yeah, shoot, sweet, played my 3/4, and yeah,
absolutely.
And so maybe that will start to bring Grundy into it, but each week's going to be a different situation depending on their opponents. They've got a lot of luxury there.
I think there are two things that are clear. Number one, we're not quite sure. We're just speculating on how they're going to use the extra sub rule. So there will be a slight change as far as possibly strategy, but we do expect rucks or rookies will probably be the one to go off.
No, but we've seen it before though, right? I mean, you can't imagine.
Well, the rucks were getting subbed off, but then
rucks
you look at teams.
They were going.
But looking at the teams with the two ruck system in general, so like Tim English does, sweep now get a game knowing that he can just get off the field. So looking at teams that maybe do the one ruck preferably would be beneficial. The other thing that's clear to me is that there's no guaranteed top 2 ruck this year. Like, who can you honestly say this person's going to be top 2 or 3? Outside of a good chance, outside of saying, well, Tim English could still develop and he could be top 2 or 3.
Well,
does Witts hold on?
Like, there's value in English's price.
Yes.
But the problem with English is he still only played 15 games last year. And it seems to be a trend, unfortunately, with him is that his body's just not holding up to AFL level. And the ruck is one of those spots where, and you guys have gone through it as well, if first of all, you probably should have some sort of backup, which is where I suppose Darcy Cameron falls into this equation. But it's very easy to get injured in there, and you have minimal backup even on the bench. So it's very easy to lose points out of the ruck line when there's an injury that happens. So yeah, you kind of got to go for reliability as well. And English has just proved, unfortunately, last year that he can't do 22 games. So it doesn't put a huge red line through him for me, but it definitely goes, unless he's going to be guaranteed to go 120 or something, like so far above everybody else that you just got to jump on. Then you'd see it.
See, at the moment, I'm starting English because I don't want to be that situation where, you trade him in and then he gets injured and you've burnt that extra trade. And like, if he's fit to start the year, I'll back him in until he goes down, and then we'll see. Hopefully, somebody's broken out there. But I
It's
think
the Nat Fife effect of years
exactly.
gone by.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I suppose we've sort of segued to English and not really. But how much do we think Lob impacts English, or if at all? Is he going to have, is he going to be a 10% ruck, or is he going to be a 30% ruck?
I think it helps because then they don't play Jordan Sweet. They play
Oh,
Lob.
yeah, Sweet's not
And
playing.
then that's right. And Lob gets to, be his pinch hitter.
And obviously, Steph Martin's not there anymore. So
that's right. So I think it actually
English.
helps English.
While we're on English as well, he also has the concussion issue, because we know that they're conservative. When he gets knocked out, he doesn't just miss the week. They're more conservative, and he might miss 2, and that's definitely a real issue.
absolutely. Yeah, especially in that position, right? He's just more prone to getting head knocks when he's filling himself with the ball for high marks, etc. I, again, haven't ruled him out, but I'm saying, and look, you're right, Swizz, in that you'd rather start him, right? Because if he goes on a heater early, which he could do, he could, like last year, for example, went on 120, 130 over the first 4 or 5 rounds, and then he's trying to scramble to try and get him in.
Yeah, and then you bring him in, and then you watch him get concussed, and you're like,
yeah,
frigging
so
kidding me?
you actually save a trade by starting him because of that.
Yeah.
So look, there's definitely reasons for him, and I'm not like, I just don't know where I sit right now, to be honest, with English. Witts is an interesting one, right? So Witts, obviously 605k, had his best ever output with over 22 games, but really tailed off towards the end. So was that he was just tired? Was it injury related? Is there another reason? I think at one point he was averaging close to 130 for the first half of the season.
But he also didn't play at all 2021 because he did that ACL. So maybe he started off fresh and on fire, and then the lack of conditioning or the season length started to get to him.
But he still played 22.
Mm.
And that's more than you can say for literally
And he's captain.
the first 7 runs.
Also captain as well. So they definitely want him out there.
So do you spend that little bit extra money and then just get that security in, say, a Jared Witts? Also, who just happens to have the round 13 buys.
He's got the buy by himself,
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's a huge advantage. A huge advantage that is understated. So,
and I don't know if he'll be picked as much as the other guys, just because the Gold Coast factor. They just don't get the same love.
Yeah, and that's true. But he could be the standout ruck this year.
He could. Absolutely could. Because if you think Anderson, Rowell improve, even Took still could have a couple points in him. That he's going to keep knocking down to them. You would expect the Suns to improve because Ben King's there to straighten them up. Like Chol as now a second, full forward with King. They probably kick more goals. Their slice of the pie gets a bit better. Does Witts, those hit outs become a bit more effective?
It's a good midfield to tap to, though, as well.
It
When you
is
kind of look at Anderson, Took, Rowell, I think they're definitely a good enough contested team to sort of win clearances.
I'll go record right now and say if I could lock in 110 and 22 games from Jared Witts right now, I will take it. I'll bite your fucking hand off in the ruck line because I'm just so left field with everything. I don't think there is a better option, to be honest, and that's saying something. Jared Witts is the best option in the ruck this year, guys. Who would have thought that?
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it is crazy because, it's just there's no one else to me that looks with value upside. So the other one that's obviously there is Darcy.
Yep.
But they've just had Luke Jackson come over. So what does that ruck split looks like? So we saw, obviously, he rucked with Lloyd Meek in the team. And it was at some points, Meek was doing 50% CBAs. And Darcy wasn't getting that line share. Now, I would suggest that they want to try and get the most out of Luke Jackson that they possibly can. And the most out of Luke Jackson is getting him around the ball. So what does that split look like?
It's interesting. I think Jackson was talked about even maybe playing at centre half back or something as well. Can play forward. I think the issue with Meek was Darcy was a better forward than Meek, and Meek pretty much just played ruck because that's what he could do. Darcy again has the same questions about his body though. When you kind of go through the top line there, you got I think the best scenario for anyone is that Max Gorn gets defender status or Grundy gets forward status.
Would be good, yeah.
And then that would be like a round 6 hallelujah because it's like, well, there's your cover as well.
Well, they've got to start there to get that though, right? Like at centre bounces. So isn't that how they work out the percentages? It's like where you start and where your actual traditional position is.
Yep. Which means that 35% of the time, Gorn's going to have to start in the back line. instead of in the, so 65
And
maybe
I
in the
think
ruck
that
off.
that's definitely something that could come out of this, is that the ruck dual position is going to be really valuable, and we're going to see rucks during the season become more important. So someone like a Tim English could get forward status at round 6. Well, therefore you have to jump on him because he's going to be probably
Yeah. I don't think
that top
anyone
6
else is
range.
going to be taking the main share of the ruck for English though. But I think you're right as far as
Yeah,
Gawn
but he
and
only
Grundy
needs
definitely could.
35%.
Yeah, I know, but I think there's
Yeah,
no one else really to kick him out unless they're playing Sweet in the ruck and playing English forward, which they won't do. I don't think English will be getting that split as much.
fair enough. Well,
Grundy
and
and Gawn are definitely viable. Marshall may have to play forward for the first sort of 6 rounds, and then halfway through the season, King comes back. Marshall's now forward eligible and gets the lion's share of the ruck. That's another possibility. Once
yep.
Max King, because what do you get? Shoulder reconstruction. He'll be back partway through the year, maybe. Kingy, possibly. Well, I don't know what other option they have. They probably need him to come back and just try and bring it to ground or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm looking at so outside of those top 4 guys, I mean, Rob doesn't really excite me. I mean, 102 average, 20 games. Is there upside for him? Maybe. Is it really worth that punt? Probably not. Nick Nat, Blitzarves, Nank,
Yeah.
22 games at least, but he's obviously shares that ruck duties with Soldo. Goldstein's probably going down. And then the next one you've got is Marshall there. So I was very keen to lock in Marshall before Max King went down. And now I'm sort of like, if I go Marshall, I'm probably going to have, say, Darcy Cameron back up, because not only is his body unreliable, but also his role could be in question. So it's what do you do with that? What are your thoughts on Marshall, Swizz?
Since King went down, I'm not as big of a fan. I want to see how they structure up. I'm really worried now that it's Tom Campbell comes in and Marshall plays some forward. I just don't see where they're, unless they can sign another forward, or Haynes from last year recovers in time. But that's just a massive hole that they haven't had to deal with for a couple of years. Membry does a job. But yeah, I've got major concerns around that, because we know Marshall can at least go forward. So, and the fact that they've got actually a proper ruck on their list, does that change things for him?
Well, I know that they want to use Marshall in the ruck. I know
They
that's what they
do,
want.
but they've just lost their best
Rob
forward.
Peter to pay Paul,
Yeah.
And look, Tom Campbell, like there could have been, there's a case to be made that he might have been the starting 22 anyway.
Might have been.
So, how much of that ruck split would have been there? So therefore, are they using Jack Hayes? Are they using, what's their next man up situation in that regard? And it could be that they start Campbell and Hayes. So it's a preseason watch with Marshall, I guess, but he's cheap enough to, he's basically, $6,000 cheaper than Brody Grundy. I'm probably more leaning towards taking a flyer on Marshall than I would on Grundy. I think there's more scope for Marshall to be the number 1 ruck than there is for Brody Grundy. So that's why I'm potentially looking at that.
I think that's valid. And again, if Marshall gets forward status and then all of a sudden starts to get the lion's share, then I'm straight away looking at it. Again, it just comes down to role. But there is definitely a lot of teams with, even if this is questionable here, imagine draft leagues. Who are you going to pick up? Like there's so many with the 2 drafts here and there. It's like, well, you look at, Meek's now gone to Hawthorn, but okay, well, there's Ned Reeves has probably got the line probably first dibs. So watch that one. So what do they do? With Reeves and look at Meek and so Max Lynch there. So it's like, well, what happens there? And then you got Port Adelaide is very interesting for me as well, because it's like, well, is Lysette recovered? Is he their best one, or are they going with Hayes? But they also showed that they wanted to use Teakle at the back end of the year and really valued him in some capacity. So there's a lot up in the air at the moment. I mean, Asava Radagalia, a cheap $174,000 ruck forward. They like him. It's like, well, is he finally coming along? Segler as well could knock out Stanley, because Stanley wasn't their preferred option, and then all of a sudden he's now a premiership player. They couldn't get their team right as far as that ruck line. Segler was meant to be their number 1, came in, was injury riddled for most of the year, came back, and then it was kind of like, well, Geelong kept winning, so it was sort of too little too late for Segler. I think there's so much up in the air at the moment with some of these ruck lines which is why it sucks. It's probably the hardest line at the moment.
Yeah, I'd say that as well. I suppose we probably, in terms of mid prices, there's not really much, and I think that's the other key thing is that in most years we've had a mid price option that we could go, okay, well at least if they get the number one ruck, then fantastic. We're going to lock that guy away, and then we just have to focus on finding one other ruck. This year, the probably the biggest one, which you've already touched on, is Lloyd Meek, but he's just got question marks written all over him. He's a sub risk as well. I hate his price point. 428 or something, isn't it? Like
431 for Meek.
He averaged he averaged too much. he was too good of a ruckman over there with Darcy. And 80 is just not even in the realm of I could deal with at his price. Like he'd need to average 100 to be worth it. So fuck, that's a real tough call.
It's hard. I've seen people even tempted with Lyset at 429, Draper with for 398. People are scratching at anything.
Draper's a shout if he can put it together. But Essendon are in shambles and they have been for a better part of a decade. So don't rest your laurels on anything.
I know a lot of the Draper, but it's shown absolutely no ceiling at all. Like I don't want to go near somebody who doesn't have any ceiling. That's I know. Yeah, we were looking for that cheap option, and that like Blue Sarves from Geelong has tempted me a little but then that Mr. Fix-It guy and stuff, but he's still
they'll change.
And he won't average top, and that, so he's sort of going to be at best around his mark. Darcy Cameron, I've got him in the forward line. I'm tempted to start him also in the ruck, and then maybe flick him forward when maybe it becomes more clearer because he's Collingwood's clear number one ruck.
Yeah, he can definitely buy us some time because he's got an average anywhere from let's say 95 to 110.
Yeah.
So
it's the same as
case,
English
he can
last
be
year.
an F6.
To me, that's right. He's a top 6 forward. Hopefully, he's the or at worst becomes that guy who's your R3, F7 sort of F6 loopholing.
And there's actually upside there too because you've got to think about. Okay, so let's have a look at Collingwood's best 22. Is Mason Cox still even in there?
At best, I don't. It's a hard one, isn't he? I think he's in and out depending on the matchup.
So depending on if they go with an extra tall. Now, I thought if they were looking at say the 5 interchange players, that he would still definitely be in. But now they've got Dan McStay there, right? So they can use him as that chop out player and then have Cameron as a 90% ruck. Now, if that's the case, Cameron's probably averaging 110, right? Like that's a pretty good result out of a 450k player. However, they could also go with Nathan Krieger, who can chop out in the ruck. Would he have more ruck time? I know Krieger's a bit of a bit part everywhere player, right? So he can play centre half back, he can play centre half forward, he can play on the ruck. Like he's never really been consistent because of his injuries. They've also Aiden Begg has been fucking killing it in preseason so far. And we saw him for a couple of games last year. He's actually a rookie ruckman at the moment. I think he's priced at about 187k. If he gets some game time, then I think he'll probably chew up a little bit of the on-ball time from Cameron. Now, he's not a traditional, he's more of a follow-up, attack the ball style ruckman. But he's definitely good around the ground. He's got burst of speed and can burst from pack. So there's opportunities there in the Collingwood lineup, but you'd say definitely Cameron's number one by an absolute mile.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so what does it look like? Well, we've seen a 50-50 split with Cox, and we've seen him average, what did he end up averaging last year, Cameron?
85, 84.
85. So, and from when was it that Grundy went down? Round six, I think. So, I don't have those stats off the top of my head, but I would say he probably averaged 9,500.
I think Darcy's probably the best lock as far as R2. It's the same thing we did with English because everyone was saying, oh, you have to lock in Gawn and Grundy. And I was like, well, here we were sitting going, well, I'm not so sure it's Gawn and Grundy. And the worst thing is that if you go with the set and forget ruck system, and if you went and go, okay, I'm going English and Wits as your set and forget, well, if they're not top 2, then you're burning a trade or you're stuck with them for the whole year. And I think that what you're saying is it buys time. If you think Whitson and English with Darcy as your forward to give you cover and that buys you time, I think they'll both do quite well.
So
Cameron as the R2, same as last year. It's like, well, if you start with one premium, let's say you're going Wits or let's say you're going English, that's your one premium ruck. And now you get to see the start of the year, who's firing, who is going to be top 2. and then you can go and lock them in without having to try and lock yourself into a system with less flexibility. Swiss.
So
to answer your question, Chris, he went 97.
Yeah, I mean, so what? Monster lock? Is he one of the
what's
best?
that? That's 13
So he's either
points.
going to be a lock in the forward line, or
that's 13 points already just there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's either going to lock your forward line, or he's going to be a lock in your ruck line. Either way, I think Darcy Cameron is probably
I think
the biggest lock.
97, you're in that conversation as as we said, a
top 10 forward.
Yeah.
Or some description.
Yeah.
And so
it gives you cut and ends up giving cover.
Last year? Where was the cutoff for the top 10? It was
I'm just trying to...
Jeremy Cameron at 91. So 97 puts you up as a top 4 forward last year.
It's a no-brainer.
Now, having said that, I think this year there are better forwards.
Yeah, there are.
So the ceiling at probably top 10s maybe jump up to 95-ish.
Yeah, but you're still in that mix, and you're providing a ruck cover,
which is a must. So the question then to me becomes: does your second ruck, let's call that Marshall, Darcy, Grundy, whoever you decide to, are they averaging more than, say, Taranto, Cornelio, Rosie? These guys, because that's the premium you're taking out to fit one of those other guys in the forward, to fit Cameron in the forward line to play an extra ruck. So there's a real structure question for you. And right now, the only one that I would say, I think Taranto is an absolute lock. So I wouldn't even park him in that conversation. But
he's basically the same price as Marshall. Taranto.
Right. So is he gonna? So does Marshall say average more than Cornelio? Maybe.
Maybe not. Depending on your role.
But he's 70K cheaper, right? Does Rosie average more than Marshall?
Good conversation.
Question marks, right?
Yeah.
So those are the questions that you're going to have to work out with your structure long term, because I think that Cameron is better suited because the ruck situation we just don't know anything about. There's not going to be any real 2 guarantees. Lock in one, whether that's Jared Witts, whether that's Tim English. Lock in one, get Darcy Cameron at R2, and then wait it out. They're not going to price you out immediately. And there's not really enough really super value guys in the forward line that you're going to be like, oh, well, I have to have this one. That's how I'm sort of structuring it up. Darcy Cameron R2, lock away number 1, and then wait and see if it's worth putting that extra money in the forward line or putting in the ruck. Because traditionally we had rucks that would score much more than the forward line. This year, I think that that's not actually the case. I don't think there's the standout 110 plus option that we've been so familiar with in the ruck line.
All right, boys, we got to wrap this up. Let's go with forward. So rucks on your bench. Who are you looking at? That might be either.
I was just thinking that it's
a loophole.
If you're wanting because I want the ruck forward swing then when I move Darcy Cameron forward. So I think you've got the 123 guys in Jacob Edwards and Samson Ryan, who potentially look closer than a few others. Jack Williams average -2 last year, so you've got the 102 guy to save cash, which is Nicholas Madden from GWS, but I don't see him getting a game. So it's like,
if you're going to loophole, that's probably a good shake. Otherwise,
or do you want the guy who could potentially play throughout the year?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Or even Jacob Edwards could surprise us if he finally develops. I don't know. Chris, what do you think? Anything shaken for you?
Yeah, well, with that, I mean, also to take into consideration would be buy structure. So try not to have if it's going to be a permanent loophole player for you, that's fine. Try not to have it in a week where you're going to have a lot of premiums out. So if it's going to cost you an extra 20K to potentially have a playing player, it might be worth it from the start of the season. I don't know who that is, though. I'm not sold on Jacob Edwards because they've also got Charlie Comben down there that apparently is training the house down. I mean, he's playing more as a forward, but they've got him, they've got Tristan Cherry, they've got Goldstein. So he's going to have to knock down a huge door to get into that ruck line, and there'd have to be quite a few injuries. Samson Ryan seems to be the one because he's really
after
next off the rank.
There's not really that. And Richmond, what do we got? Tom Lynch and Brewalders are only 2 tall forwards now.
Yeah.
Too, so there's potential.
Well, Eric Banning from Fremantle apparently just got back from America, White House down.
I see what you did there. There's considerations there. And look, there'll be an obvious choice closer to. There's an option as well for a defender ruck. So there's that Dominic Akui. So let's say you start Gawn, he ends up playing a large percentage of time behind the ball. You might want to start one of those defender rucks there so that you can actually switch them have that switchability.
It's Blykovs.
Yeah,
Interesting.
or something
Or
like
Gorn
that.
if he
So,
does come through.
exactly. Right.
Look, I think the biggest thing to take out of this is that there's definitely probably more questions than answers at this point. So let's wait and see. We'll get into another Ruck segment closer to the season. But I think that wraps us up at the moment, boys. Thank you very much for joining. I hope everyone has a lovely new year, and we'll catch up with everyone soon for our team by team analysis. Probably our best time of the year, boys.
Yeah, I'll see you in 2023.
See you next year. What do they say? See you
Absolutely.
next year.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Cheers.
Bye.